2025 is set to be a massive year for the games industry, with the release of a new Nintendo console, a colossal slate of games, including some huge, long-awaited exclusives from all three console platform owners, and of course, the release of one of the most anticipated games in history, Grand Theft Auto 6. You can already see the impact GTA 6 is having. With so many 2025 games remaining undated, it's clear that many publishers are waiting on Rockstar to reveal the release date for GTA 6 so that they can keep their new releases away from that industry-disrupting juggernaut. 2025 has the potential to top the insanely stacked 2023 and go down as one of the biggest and most important years this industry has ever seen. So of course, I'm here to do my annual countdown of my 25 most anticipated games of the year. Well, 26, because I had to make an exception and slip an extra game onto the list following the announcement of a new entry in one of my favourite series at the Xbox Developer Direct. Now, we've got a lot of games to get to, and I'm sure this video is going to be very long, so I don't want to bloat the video with too much preamble, but there are a few small pieces of housekeeping to get out of the way. Firstly, I'd normally start the year with a video counting down my top games of the prior year, and that video is still coming, but the back half of 2024 was utterly chaotic for me, so I couldn't get to every game I was hoping to. Because of this, I decided to swap these videos around and make my most anticipated games of 2025 video first. That way, I could give myself a little extra time to knock a few games off my backlog to ensure that my top games of 2024 video is as comprehensive as possible. I should also note that I decided to hold off on recording this video until after the Xbox Developer Direct, because I figured we'd get some noteworthy news and release dates for a few of the games on my list. And I'm glad I did hold off on recording this video, because we ended up getting the release dates for South of Midnight, Doom the Dark Ages, and Clair Obscur Expedition 33, as well as the announcement of a brand new Ninja Gaiden game that I just had to include on this list. Secondly, I set some rules for what games are eligible to be included on this list. I've opted not to include any early access games. I'm very excited to play Slay the Spire 2, but I'm more than happy to let it cook and wait for the full release. I also won't be including any DLC on this list, only full games. And with a year this stacked, there's simply no room on this list for remasters. Though a quick shout out to Freedom Wars Remastered, which I loved on Vita, it's probably my favourite Monster Hunter clone. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, an excellent platformer that is a must-play if you missed out on it on Wii and 3DS, and Suikoden 1 and 2 Remastered, which I'm definitely going to be checking out, as Suikoden is a huge blind spot in my JRPG knowledge that I'm eager to fill in. Also, keep in mind that this list only includes games that have been confirmed for 2025, so games like IO's 007 game or Insomniac's Wolverine game that don't have confirmed release years won't be included. This extends to games like Judas that we expect to release in 2025 but aren't officially confirmed for release in 2025. Though I hope Judas does drop this year, as BioShock is one of my favourite games of all time, so I'll be there day one for any new Ken Levine game. For this same reason, I'm not including two of the biggest upcoming indies, Hollow Knight Silksong and Mina the Hollower. I'm sure they're both going to be superb, and I'm particularly desperate to get my hands on Mina, as I'm a huge fan of Yacht Club and consider Shovel Knight to be one of the best platformers of all time, but these games have gone dark for so long that we don't know what state they're in, and when we'll finally get to play them. I was also going to include Earthblade on that list, but as I was about to record this video, the news broke that Extremely OK Games has made the shocking decision to cancel Earthblade after working on it for almost 6 years, which is a massive shame, as what we saw of Earthblade looked great. Finally, with such a huge lineup of games announced for 2025, not everything could make the top 25, so I have 4 quick honourable mentions to go through. Civilization 7 is going to be huge. This isn't a series I'm particularly into, but it would be ridiculous not to mention that a new entry in the biggest 4X strategy franchise in the world is right around the corner, and for the first time, it's going to be available on not just PC, but all 3 consoles at launch as well. Another game dropping in the first quarter of 2025 that I want to shout out is Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake. JRPGs are the ultimate video game comfort food to me, so I'm looking forward to playing through both of these games in the gorgeous HD 2D art style. I'm extremely curious about what changes Square will make to these 2 games in these remakes, as DQ1 and 2 are incredibly simplistic games, much more so than even Dragon Quest 3, so I think they're going to require a degree of modernisation to make them palatable to gamers with more modern gaming sensibilities. Crypt of the Necrodancer and Cadence of Hyrule seem like games that I should love on paper, but I've never liked the gameplay mechanic of moving your character in rhythm with the beat. But when Brace Yourself Games announced their new game, Rift of the Necrodancer, a Guitar Hero influenced take on the Necrodancer franchise, it had my interest immediately. I'm massively nostalgic for Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and a huge sucker for rhythm games in general, so this is certainly on my list to check out in 2025. And finally, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is undoubtedly going to be one of the biggest RPGs of 2025. I'm intrigued by Warhorse Studios' more grounded approach to making an RPG, setting it in a real historical setting with no fantasy elements. But I never got around to the original Kingdom Come Deliverance, so I doubt I'll be getting around to 2 anytime soon, though I know this game is going to sell gangbusters and be a huge deal for the sizable fanbase of the original Kingdom Come. Now, let's waste no more time and get into my 25 most anticipated games of 2025. Kicking off the list at number 26 is Atomfall, a new IP from Rebellion, the studio best known for the Sniper Elite series. 2025 is shaping up to be a big year for Rebellion, as they're also putting out a new Sniper Elite game in just a matter of days. Atomfall takes place in an alternate history version of the United Kingdom, where the 1957 wind-scale nuclear disaster was far more catastrophic, turning much of England's north into an uninhabitable exclusion zone. And it's set to be a big change of pace for Rebellion, as it's their first crack at making a first-person action game. In Atomfall, you'll be exploring this irradiated zone, scavenging for supplies, crafting weapons and armour, and managing various survival mechanics while fending off the threats of mutated creatures, robots, and fellow survivors. And it features a completely non-linear story, with quest lines that can be explored in any order. Atomfall's setting is very unique, giving the game a distinct vibe that should help differentiate Atomfall from the various other dystopian set games on the market. I was also happy to hear Rebellion cite Fallout New Vegas as a direct inspiration for Atomfall. If you're looking for inspiration when creating an atmospheric, post-apocalyptic game, there are few better games to look to than New Vegas. Ratatan is a crowd-funded spiritual successor to the PSP's Patapon trilogy, being developed by many key members of the teams behind those games. Patapon has some of the most unique mechanics I've ever encountered in a game. Blending rhythm and real-time strategy gameplay, Patapon saw you controlling an army of the tiny titular Patapons, issuing them various commands by tapping button combinations in rhythm with the music. Ratatan follows a very similar formula, though one thing sure to differentiate Ratatan from Patapon is its structure. Unlike the Patapon games, which had a more linear, stage-based progression system, Ratatan is a roguelike. There's nothing else even remotely like Patapon, which is what makes Ratatan so exciting. If Ratatan can recapture even half the magic of Patapon, it's going to be a fantastic experience. And seeing as Ratatan hit its Kickstarter funding goal in under an hour, and went on to clear 10 times its initial goal in backing, it's clear that I'm not the only one clamouring for more Patapon. Next up, we have the first of 2 Obsidian games releasing in 2025, Avowed. Taking place in the same universe as their Pillars of Eternity games, Avowed was initially pitched as Obsidian's take on Skyrim, but as development progressed, they decided to take it in a different, more unique direction. Avowed still offers everything you'd expect out of an Obsidian RPG, a rich story with a robust selection of companion characters to discover, and a heavy focus on narrative choice and exploration, but Obsidian seems to have put a particular emphasis on evolving their combat mechanics with Avowed. Avowed has a large assortment of weapons that let you jump from melee combat to spell-flinging wand combat to gunplay, which isn't something I'm used to seeing in this style of high fantasy setting. In Avowed, magic and weapons can be used in tandem to create unique attack combinations. For instance, you can use your wand to freeze an enemy and then shatter them to pieces with a swipe of your sword, and you can mix and match just about any combination of weaponry in Avowed thanks to its dual wielding mechanic. You can take the classic sword and board approach, or wield a blade and a wand together. You can even go nuts and dual wield 2 wands to bombard enemies with an endless flurry of spells if you so desire. And you're encouraged to experiment with different weapon combos, as Avowed allows you to set different weapon loadouts and hot swap between them on the fly. While I was initially skeptical of Avowed, as I wasn't sold on the first look at the gameplay we got, subsequent showings have been much stronger, and with the recent run of glowing previews and Obsidian's rock-solid track record, I'd be shocked if Avowed was anything less than very good. Avowed is also releasing at a good time with its mid-February release date. I'm craving something like Avowed right now. I couldn't get into Dragon Age, so I'm looking for something to give me that Western RPG fix. Because if we're being honest, Japan ran laps around the Western world when it came to RPGs in 2024. Throughout the last generation, I noticed a frustrating trend of many open world games becoming far too bloated. A great example of this problem was Dying Light 2. I loved the original Dying Light, and while Dying Light 2 was good, it was an overstuffed experience with too much fat on the bone. So I was thrilled when Techland announced that the next entry in the series, Dying Light the Beast, was set to be a more pared back, contained experience, with approximately 18 hours of content that was going to be sold at a lower price. Don't get me wrong, I love plenty of long games. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Persona 3 Reload, and Metaphor were 3 of my favourite games of 2024, but not every game needs to be a massive time sink, and I'll always welcome more games in the 10 to 20 hour time range. Originally starting its life as a DLC expansion for Dying Light 2, Techland eventually decided to flesh Dying Light the Beast out into a full standalone game, though as a compromise, anyone who purchased the Ultimate Edition of Dying Light 2 will receive the Beast at no extra cost. Dying Light the Beast brings back Dying Light 1 protagonist Kyle Crane, who's been imprisoned and subjected to brutal experiments for the past 13 years. But now he's loose and seeking revenge against the captors who relentlessly tormented him. The Beast's gameplay will still be familiar to anyone who's played the prior Dying Light games. You're still dealing with both human survivors and hordes of zombies who become more dangerous once the sun goes down, and traversing the world with the fluid parkour mechanics that made Dying Light such a standout open world experience. But there are some new twists to the formula in The Beast. The experiments performed on Kyle have left his human and zombie DNA fully intertwined, giving him some new abilities, the most substantial of which is his ability to transform into his new beast form, which turns Kyle into a hulking monster who can crush anything in his path. I know what you're thinking. It's blasphemous to have a new FromSoft game at number 22, and I'm sure Night Rain is much higher up on other people's most anticipated games lists. But don't take this placement the wrong way. I adore FromSoft. Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne and Sekiro are among my favourite games ever made. But while Night Rain has piqued my curiosity, and I'll of course be there at launch checking it out, I'm not entirely sure Night Rain is where I want to see FromSoft's resources allocated. Elden Ring Night Rain is not your traditional Souls game. It's a co-op focused, 3-player roguelike experience set in a procedurally generated version of Limgrave from base Elden Ring. Each run of Night Rain takes place across 3 in-game days, where you'll explore and strengthen your character throughout the day, as a battle royale style shrinking circle funnels you towards a boss you'll have to fight when night comes, with day 1 and 2 ending with a minor boss fight, and day 3 having you take on a final major boss. Night Rain is going to play a little differently to base Elden Ring, thanks to its expanded traversal mechanics that allow you to run up walls and mantle, making movement a little more fluid than it was in Elden Ring, and maybe even a little more Sekiro-like. You'll also have a spectral bird that works like a glider, allowing you to traverse chasms effortlessly. The one shot of the Night Rain trailer that piqued my interest the most appeared to show a team of 3 battling the Nameless King from Dark Souls 3, so I wonder if Night Rain is going to pull in more bosses from From's prior games. There are plenty of bosses from Dark Souls and Demon Souls that would fit perfectly in the world of Elden Ring, but I'd love it if they took a step further and got truly weird with it by bringing in some of the eldritch monstrosities from Bloodborne. While I am a little apprehensive about the design philosophy behind it, Night Rain is undeniably a unique idea for a game, and up to this point, FromSoft has given me no reason to doubt them, so I'll be going into Night Rain open-minded and optimistic. Now we arrive at one of the most visually striking games of 2025, South of Midnight. Coming out of We Happy Few developers Compulsion Games, South of Midnight is showing a very different side of the studio. Taking place in a fantastical version of America's Deep South, South of Midnight follows Hazel, a young woman who after losing her home to a hurricane, sets out on the path to become a weaver, someone whose magical abilities can fix the broken bonds of tortured souls. Of course, the first thing that catches your eye with South of Midnight is its unique, claymation-inspired art style, which is just breathtaking. I especially love the character design in South of Midnight. Whether it's the man with the half-skeletal face from the reveal trailer, or the giant catfish Hazel is seen riding atop in the gameplay trailer, South of Midnight seems filled with memorable people and creatures, most of whom are based on southern urban legends. We Happy Few was a game I was very excited about pre-launch, but it didn't turn out to be what I had hoped, so I do have some apprehensions about the gameplay of South of Midnight, but I'm glad to see Compulsion going less dystopian and more fantastical with their next game, as it feels like a better fit for the studio, and the gameplay we've seen of South of Midnight looks good. It has a bit of a Kenna Bridge of Spirits vibe. Hazel's power set seems interesting, with her weaving abilities letting her create spectral weapons to fend off enemies, as well as traversal tools like a glider and a grapple. I just hope South of Midnight plays as smoothly as it looks like it does, because Compulsion's 2 prior games, We Happy Few and Contrast, were a little rough around the edges. At number 20, we have the second Obsidian game scheduled for release in 2025, The Outer Worlds 2. After being announced back in 2021 with a CGI teaser, we finally got our first real look at The Outer Worlds 2 at the Game Awards last month, and it looks like exactly what you'd hope it to be. A more developed and expansive version of The Outer Worlds that still maintains the wit and humour that gave the original so much personality. The Outer Worlds 2 retains the dialogue trees, combat, branching narrative decisions, and pointed satire at megacorporations, but also greatly expands the scope. The Outer Worlds 2 is set to be a far bigger experience than its predecessor, with the trailer promising that it'll feature twice as much content as the original Outer Worlds, which sounds like a perfect sweet spot. I'm frequently criticising games for being bloated and overstaying their welcome, but The Outer Worlds was the rare AAA game that went the other way and felt a bit too short. You could finish the main story of The Outer Worlds in about 12 to 14 hours, so I'm guessing the main quest of The Outer Worlds 2 will land somewhere in the 20 to 25 hour range, which honestly sounds ideal to me. Similarly to Avowed, Obsidian is also focused on refining the combat of The Outer Worlds in 2, with better feeling gunplay and a wider and weirder lineup of weapons, which is a good call, because the occasionally wonky combat is the biggest shortcoming of the original Outer Worlds. Another year means more Yakuza games. Seriously, I have no idea how RGG Studios manages to put out so many games while still maintaining a consistently high level of quality. Between February of 2023 and January of 2024, RGG Studios released 3 Yakuza games, all of which were critically well received. As of 2020's Yakuza Like a Dragon, the series has split into 2 distinct pillars, with one being the current run of mainline Like a Dragon games that are turn-based RPGs, and the other being the spin-offs like a Dragon Gaiden, Ishin, and Judgment that are keeping the traditional action-focused beat-em-up gameplay of Yakuza 0 through 6. The latest entry in the series, Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, falls into the latter of the 2 categories. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii stars fan-favourite lovable lunatic Goro Majima, who is inarguably one of the best characters to grace the Yakuza series, and maybe games in general. In Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, Majima finds himself stranded on a tropical island, suffering from a spell of amnesia, so naturally, he thinks he's a pirate, leading to more insane Yakuza shenanigans as Majima forms his pirate crew and sets sail on his strangest adventure yet. And RGG has fully committed to the pirate gimmick. While Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is still very much a Yakuza game, complete with wacky side stories and returning mini-games like kart racing and karaoke, it's also a fully fledged pirate game, so you're of course given a ship to sail from place to place that you can upgrade and engage in ship-to-ship naval combat with. Like many prior Yakuza games, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii's combat system has you switching between multiple fighting stances that change how Majima controls, letting you go back and forth between Majima's classic fast and aggressive Mad Dog style of brawling and his new Sea Dog style, where Majima fights like a pirate, wielding cutlasses and flintlock pistols. Even for the always unpredictable Yakuza franchise, this still stands out as such a wonderfully bizarre direction to take the series in, and it's a clever way of reusing some of the assets of Infinite Wealth while still making something that feels completely original. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is the most excited I've ever been for a Yakuza spin-off. And yes, I'm going to continue calling it Yakuza, because while I understand the reasoning behind unifying the series name worldwide, I still think Yakuza is a better name for the series than Like a Dragon. Ninja Gaiden Ragebound was without question one of the most exciting reveals of last month's Game Awards for me. Ninja Gaiden is a franchise that's been long overdue for a new entry. But I've gotta say, this is not the kind of entry I was expecting to get, though it's certainly a pleasant surprise. I love Ninja Gaiden, but when I, and I'm sure most others, think of Ninja Gaiden, the first thing that pops into my mind is the more modern Ninja Gaiden games from Team Ninja. But the series of course got its start as a side-scroller in arcades and on the NES. But after the NES trilogy, this style of Ninja Gaiden game was completely abandoned, so I never expected to see it return. But here we are in 2025, getting a brand new 2D Ninja Gaiden side-scroller that takes the series back to its roots for the first time in over 30 years. This feels like one of those pipe dream titles that fans talk about, but you never expect to actually be made. Unlike most Ninja Gaiden games, you don't play as Ryu Hayabusa in Ragebound, as it takes place concurrently with the original NES Ninja Gaiden when Ryu is in America. Instead, Ragebound sees you playing as series newcomer Kenji Mozu, who has to step up and defend Hayabusa Village in Ryu's absence. Ninja Gaiden Ragebound looks phenomenal, with stellar pixel art, fluid animation, and refined movement and combat. It's everything I could ask for out of a 2D Ninja Gaiden game, though I guess the impressive look of Ninja Gaiden Ragebound should come as no surprise, seeing as Ragebound is being developed by the Game Kitchen, who have proven their pixel art bona fides with the two Blasphemous games. The aspect of Ragebound I'm most curious about is its difficulty. Ninja Gaiden games in general are known for being highly challenging, but the original Ninja Gaiden trilogy on NES is utterly brutal, to the point of being downright unfair at times. It's not like the team at the Game Kitchen are strangers to punishing games though, as both Blasphemous games are pretty damn tough. But I wonder if they'll scale down the difficulty of prior Ninja Gaiden games to make Ragebound a bit more approachable to newcomers. Making a game challenging but not frustrating is a tricky balancing act to pull off, but the Game Kitchen are a studio that can do it. I just hope Ragebound sells well, because these retro-inspired platformers often go underappreciated. Seriously, go play Cyber Shadow, it's great and nobody bought it. Next, we have what will without a doubt be one of the best-selling games of 2025, Monster Hunter Wilds. I think everyone who pays attention to the gaming space remembers how popular Monster Hunter World was when it launched in 2018, but I don't know if people realise just how huge it was. Monster Hunter World sold an extraordinary 25 million copies, making it the single best-selling game Capcom has ever released. Think about what that means. World sold more than any Street Fighter or Resident Evil game. And now, after getting Monster Hunter Rise between releases, we're finally getting the huge budget World follow-up, Monster Hunter Wilds, on consoles and PC in 2025. It's not hard to see why Monster Hunter has become such a juggernaut. It has a practically perfect gameplay loop to appeal to dopamine-seeking gamers. You hunt monsters to harvest their parts, which you then use to craft new armor and weapons that will allow you to hunt bigger, more powerful monsters to acquire their parts to craft even better gear. Rinse and repeat for dozens of hours. Like its predecessor, Monster Hunter Wilds is focused on making its environments feel like real, tangible places, with the world having a functioning ecosystem, complete with a food chain hierarchy, where apex monsters prey upon weaker monsters, offering a diverse array of explorable biomes to support a wide range of monster life, with the time of day and dynamic weather affecting the behaviour of monsters. But Monster Hunter Wilds is also implementing some significant quality of life improvements to make this the most frictionless Monster Hunter game yet. The new focus system allows you to lock on to specific points of a monster's body, which is incredibly helpful as you often need to target specific body parts to acquire the materials needed to craft gear. Like all mainline Monster Hunter games, Wild can be played solo or with other players, but Wilds has a new feature to make life a little easier for solo players: the addition of NPC support hunters who can join you when you need a bit of backup to take down a particularly ferocious monster. And in Wilds, you're given a new type of mount called a secret. who not only helps you traverse Wild's huge locales quickly and allow for mounted combat when taking on huge monsters, but is also responsible for the single biggest change to the Monster Hunter formula in Wilds. Your secret can carry a second weapon for you, meaning that for the first time in Monster Hunter history, you'll be able to have 2 unique weapons with you at all times in Wilds, which is a great way to encourage players to experiment with new weapons. And speaking of weapons, every weapon from World returns in Wilds, though they've all been fully reworked and rebalanced. The list of additions just goes on and on. There's the new hook slinger that allows you to grapple around environments, pull yourself to monsters, and zip out of the way of incoming attacks. The addition of alpha monsters, more powerful versions of any given monster that lead their pack, and the ability to wound monsters, leaving them with visible weak points. So it's clear that Wilds is primed to be the most advanced and expansive Monster Hunter game yet. I'm a huge JRPG dork, and I'm familiar with most of the big franchises in the genre, be it Final Fantasy, Persona, Dragon Quest, Tales, or Ys. But for years, one series has evaded me, my biggest RPG shame, the Trails series. I know it's one of the JRPG community's most beloved franchises, and I've always wanted to get into Trails. I've contemplated jumping into the Trails of Cold Steel series, as I've heard the endless Persona comparisons, but I've also heard that if you want to get into Trails, you want to follow the series to its very roots to get the full context, as Trails is very much one of those franchises where the more that you put in, the more you'll get out of it, and the timing just never felt right for me. So when Falcom announced a full-blown remake of the original Trails game, Trails in the Sky, last year, I was ecstatic, as it gives me the perfect gateway into the Trails series. Trails in the Sky First Chapter is an exhaustive remake. Falcom took no half measures here. First Chapter ditches the chibi look of the PSP original for fully 3D, high-fidelity character models and environments. The localization has been completely redone from the ground up, so naturally, so has all the voice work. And Trails in the Sky First is taking an incredibly ambitious approach to gameplay by allowing you to choose between playing the game with traditional turn-based combat or real-time, action-focused gameplay, which must have required such an obscene amount of work on Falcom's part. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 was the show stealer at last year's Xbox showcase for me. This turn-based RPG is coming out of a brand new French studio, and it's looking like one of the most promising studio debuts we've seen in a hot minute. Clair Obscur's story is wildly outlandish in the best way possible. It's set in a fantasy universe where once a year, a sorceress writes a number in the sky, and everybody in the world of that age dies. And every year, that number gets lower, leaving what's left of the world's population younger and younger. This time, she's going to write 33, so we play as a team of 33-year-olds with 1 year left to live, out on their final mission. Kill the sorceress and break this cycle of death once and for all. Despite being a new studio, Sandfall has managed to assemble a massive lineup of talented actors to fill the cast of Clair Obscur, including Daredevil's Charlie Cox, Planet of the Apes' Andy Serkis, and Clive Rosfield himself, Ben Starr, all of whom's performances will no doubt elevate the story further. Clair Obscur's gameplay looks every bit as promising as its story, with its stylish turn-based battles infusing some Super Mario RPG-esque real-time elements, where pressing buttons in time with attack animations can increase damage dealt and decrease incoming damage, which is a good way of keeping players who might not normally gravitate to turn-based games engaged. This seems like an incredibly ambitious first project for Sandfall Interactive, and the stakes are high, but so far they're saying all the right things. Sandfall has cited Final Fantasy and Persona as their main inspirations in making this game, and has confirmed that Expedition 33 will be a roughly 30-hour-long experience that won't be sold at full price, all of which sounds like music to my ears. It can be hard to find an audience in this industry, but if Sandfall pulls this off and delivers a game of the quality level I'm expecting, they're going to break through and make a name for themselves in the RPG space, setting their studio up to thrive in this industry for a long time to come. Nobody exudes more confidence when talking about their games than Hazelight Studios' head honcho, Mr. Fuck the Oscars himself, Joseph Fares. This was once again highlighted when he came out on stage to announce his new game, Split Fiction, at the Game Awards last month. But Joseph has certainly earned that right, as he and his studio have yet to miss. Hell, if I made Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, A Way Out, and Game of the Year winner It Takes Two, I'd probably be pretty damn confident in myself as well. Like Hazelight's two most recent releases, Split Fiction is a game played entirely in co-op, online, or ideally in local split-screen couch co-op, which is a feature that's so rare nowadays. But it's clear that there's a desire for this type of experience, as It Takes Two sold over 20 million copies. Split Fiction stars two writers, Zoe and Mio, named after Joseph Fares' daughters, who visit a company where writers can exist within a simulation of the worlds they create to help with the writing process. Unfortunately, as is so often the case, the megacorporations offering this opportunity turn out to be evil, caring about their profits over all else. And instead of helping writers, they plan to trap them in these simulations so they can steal their ideas and sell them as their own. Is it on the nose? Incredibly. But hey, I'm always down to see creatives skewering the megacorporations that so often fuck them over. However, while they're trapped in their simulations, a technical hiccup causes Zoe and Mio's simulations to become fused together. So now they'll have to work together to break free of the simulation and stop the theft of their ideas. What makes the concept of Zoe and Mio's two worlds intertwining so intriguing is that they're entirely different styles of authors. One writes sci-fi, the other writes fantasy. So when their worlds intersect, it creates a bizarre fusion of the two genres. This means that in one level, you might be riding dragons or platforming through an enchanted forest, while in the next, you'll be fighting off waves of enemies with laser swords or zooming through the streets of a cyberpunk city on Akira-style bikes. I've loved all three of Hazelight's games, and I had a fantastic time playing through both A Way Out and It Takes Two in couch co-op with my best friend, so I can't wait to do the same with Split Fiction when it drops in March. Since the PS3 360 days, Assassin's Creed fans have begged for an entry set in Japan, and in 2025 that will finally happen with the release of the long-delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows. Hey, it's better late than never, right? Taking place in 16th century Japan, AC Shadows follows dual protagonists, Yasuke, an African samurai based on a real historical figure, and Shinobi Naoe, the fictional daughter of real-world Iga clan leader Fujibayashi Nagato. There's a bit of a divide in the AC fanbase, between players who prefer the more modern action RPG style of AC games, and those who prefer the classic stealth-focused AC games that made up the original run of AC 1 through Syndicate. But in a way, having two protagonists is allowing Ubisoft to have their cake and eat it too. As Naoe is a shinobi and Yasuke is a samurai, the two play very differently and take opposite approaches to encounters. Yasuke is a huge wall of a man who wields katanas and clubs with ease, meaning he's your combat-focused character. Whereas Naoe, being a ninja, is more tactical and stealthy, skulking around in the shadows, picking off enemies one by one. While each of these characters has set missions, the majority of Shadow's content can be played by either character, allowing you to choose your preferred approach. I'm a sucker for some good stealth gameplay, so I imagine I'll be leaning more towards Naoe. Assassin's Creed Shadows is filled with new features for the series that will make the gameplay more varied and engaging than ever before. The stealth is being refined with the long overdue addition of the ability to go prone, letting you creep through grass and shimmy through crevices. Underwater stealth is also being added, allowing you to swim by enemies undetected by using a bamboo stick to breathe, and Shadows has a wide variety of period-appropriate weapons, be it katanas, spears, kunai, or kusarigama, each of which has a unique skill tree to explore, allowing you to customise your weapons and tailor them to your playstyle in a way never before possible in Assassin's Creed. Shadows also implements some impressive tech on the back end to make its world more immersive than any prior Assassin's Creed game. There's more environmental destruction than ever before, and as you play Shadows, time passes and the seasons change, with the change of seasons having tangible effects on gameplay. In spring, the grass grows longer, making it easier to evade enemies, while in winter, lakes freeze over, creating new pathways through the world. I know some people are skeptical about Shadows, and I get it. We've had so many samurai games over the past few years, and I do think there's a chance that Shadows is compared unfavourably to Ghost of Tsushima, but this series is such comfort food to me. I've played every AC game thus far, and more often than not, I've had a good time with them. It's also worth noting that Shadows is being developed by Ubisoft Quebec, a team that developed two of my personal favourite Assassin's Creed games, Odyssey and the criminally underrated Syndicate. So until they give me a reason not to, I fully trust that they'll deliver another top tier Assassin's Creed game. Pokemon Legends Arceus was a massive step in the right direction for the Pokemon series, introducing full 3D camera control to all areas of the game, a focus on rewarding exploration in its massive open areas filled with hundreds of roaming Pokemon, and new mechanics that finally allow you to throw the Pokeball to capture Pokemon for yourself. Arceus was a spin-off that was more ambitious than any of the mainline Pokemon games had been for well over a decade. While it had a few shortcomings, they were largely technical, and nothing that couldn't be cleaned up in a sequel, which is why its follow-up, Pokemon Legends ZA, is so promising. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are keeping things mostly under wraps with Legends ZA, but we can glean a couple of tantalising tidbits from its trailer. Firstly, while Pokemon Legends Arceus took place in a distant past version of Diamond and Pearl's Sinnoh region, ZA is set in modern day in X and Y's Kalos region, the Pokemon universe's version of France. ZA's trailer also teases the return of Mega Evolutions, which was one of the big gimmicks used to sell X and Y back in the day, so it's only fitting that they return if we're heading back to the Kalos region. I love Pokemon. It's a series that I'm very nostalgic about, and I'll always be keen to check out any new entry. But Pokemon had been in dire need of innovation for at least a couple of generations, so having the Legends sub-series that seems to be all about experimenting with new ideas, many of which will then be implemented into the mainline games as we saw with Scarlet and Violet, is a huge win. While details on ZA are scant, February 27th is Pokemon Day, and the Pokemon Company tends to make some big announcements that day, so I'd bet that's when we'll see some more of ZA. And God, I hope a Switch 2 version of ZA is announced, because the performance of Scarlet and Violet was rough. So I'm sure the extra horsepower in the Switch 2 would work wonders for Pokemon. Like Pokemon Legends ZA, Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra is a game that we've seen very little of, so you might be wondering why I have it so high up on this list in such a stacked year. Well, there are two main reasons, the first of which is simply that I'm a huge comic book nerd, so any new Marvel or DC game is probably going to pique my interest, especially at the moment, as I feel like we're in a bit of a drought for good comic book games. Sure, Spider-Man 2 was great, but we've also had some pretty major disappointments over the past few years, be it the unceremonious life and death of Marvel's Avengers, the aggressively mediocre Gotham Knights, or the catastrophically mismanaged Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League that saw Rocksteady, one of the industry's most talented studios, wasting years on a project that was dead on arrival. So I'm starving for the next excellent superhero game. The second and more important reason I'm so excited for Rise of Hydra is because of the talent working on it, namely Amy Hennig, who's writing and producing Rise of Hydra. You might know Amy Hennig as the creator of the Uncharted series and the writer and creative director of the first 3 Uncharted games, as well as the writer and director of the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver duology. Amy Hennig is an extraordinarily talented writer who hasn't had a project released in far too long, as she was previously working on Project Ragtag, the Star Wars game that essentially sounded like a Star Wars version of Uncharted, which might I add sounds fucking awesome, that EA tragically cancelled because, and I quote, it continued to look like a much more linear game, according to EA CFO Blake Jorgensen, as if it being a linear game was something visceral sprung on EA, and not what they were being employed to make. Can you tell I'm still salty about Visceral's closure and Project Ragtag's cancellation? Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked, but what I'm trying to say is that I'm glad to see a publisher let Amy Hennig see her project through to release. Taking place in occupied Paris during World War II, Rise of Hydra has you playing as both Captain America and Azuri, the Black Panther of that time, as well as Howling Commando Gabriel Jones and Nunnally, the leader of Wakanda's spy network, as they attempt to, you guessed it, prevent the rise of Hydra. I love this idea for a game, and I think making it a period piece will give Rise of Hydra a strong identity that will help it stand out from other superhero games on the market. Amy Hennig is also far from the only notable name involved in the creation of Rise of Hydra. We also have comic and TV writer / podcast host Mark Bernardin writing on the game, Stephen Barton, who was responsible for the iconic scores of COD 4, Titanfall 1 and 2, and the Star Wars Jedi games, doing the music for Rise of Hydra, and Carrie Payton voicing Black Panther. And seeing as he played King Ezekiel in The Walking Dead, it only seems fitting that he's playing the King of Wakanda here. As we enter the top 10, we have Borderlands 4. Borderlands is a series I've had a lot of love for since the beginning, partially because I have so many fond memories tied to the games, as I played through all of the Borderlands games with my best friend, but also because the core gameplay is so consistently strong, and when I look at Borderlands 4, I know exactly what I'm getting into, and can already tell that I'm going to have a great time with it. I love the cel-shaded art style of Borderlands, and the series' masterful blend of RPG and first-person shooter gives Borderlands one of the most addictive gameplay loops I've ever experienced. While I enjoyed Borderlands 3, it was an overly safe sequel that did just feel like more of the same, so I'm glad to see that Borderlands 4 is bringing some new ideas to the table. Borderlands 4 is a completely fresh start for the series. We're finally leaving Pandora behind completely, with Borderlands 4 taking place on a new planet called Kairos, which without spoiling anything, has become accessible after the ending of Borderlands 3. This means we've got environments and enemies in Borderlands 4, unlike anything we've seen in the series before, as well as an entirely new cast of characters, including a fresh set of Vault Hunters to play as. And as this is Gearbox's first game to leave the last-gen consoles behind, they're able to provide a truly next-gen Borderlands experience, with the world of Kairos being one big seamless open world, with no loading screens, thanks to the PS5 and Series X's SSDs. Oh, and did I mention that they added a grappling hook? And let's be real, what game isn't made better by the introduction of a grappling hook? While I always enjoy the gameplay of Borderlands, something I find less and less appealing over time is the series' writing. Without trying to sound pretentious, I found Borderlands 3's writing so juvenile and grating. I'm certainly not above some lowbrow humour, but I couldn't stand the overly memey comedy and the insufferable streamer villains of Borderlands 3. I'm gonna be honest, I platinumed Borderlands 3 and had a great time doing so, but I played a lot of that game muted while listening to podcasts or music in the background, as the dialogue just became too irritating to listen to after a while. And I'm genuinely not sure if Borderlands 3 was a massive downgrade, or if Borderlands 1 and 2 were also poorly written, and I just didn't realise because I had lower standards, as I was a teenager at the time, but had outgrown the series' writing by the time 3 came out. So Gearbox saying that they'll be toning back the humour in Borderlands 3, and instead having the comedy be more situational than scripted, sounds like a massive improvement to me. Xbox fell into a rut during the Xbox One era when it came to their exclusives. It started to feel like we were in an endless loop of Gears, Halo, Forza, Gears, Halo, Forza, while other Microsoft IPs fell to the wayside and floundered. Arguably the franchise that suffered the most during this period was Fable. Fable was probably my favourite first-party Xbox franchise back in the day. But after the original Fable trilogy was closed out with Fable 3 in 2010, it felt like Microsoft had no idea what to do with the franchise. In 2012, we got the Kinect spin-off, Fable the Journey, which wasn't what seemingly anybody wanted out of Fable, and from there, we got the announcement of the ill-fated Fable Legends, the cancelled asymmetrical multiplayer Fable game, with original Fable studio Lionhead being shuttered alongside Legends' cancellation. Since then, the Fable IP has lain dormant, but in 2025, we're finally getting our first mainline Fable game in 15 years, with Playground Games' Reboot. If Xbox wanted to keep Fable within their internal studios, there was only one clear choice of studio to reboot the series: Playground. Playground is an excellent studio. It's worth pointing out that they've never had a game land below an 85 on Metacritic, and their last 3 games have all landed in the 90s. While Fable is something very different from Playground, as the studio has exclusively developed the Forza Horizon games in the past, those are all open world games, something we can assume will be true of Fable as well. And it's not like we don't already have some big examples of historically pigeonholed studios breaking the mould and successfully creating something entirely different from what we traditionally expect from them. Let's not forget that until Horizon Zero Dawn came out, Guerrilla was known only as the Killzone studio. The most crucial reason Playground was the obvious choice to take the helm on Fable, however, is that they're a British studio, which I would say is an essential criterion for any team working on a Fable game. Fable's world and sense of humour are both incredibly British, so I don't think an American studio would be able to do the series justice. Despite it being announced so long ago, we still haven't seen much of Fable in action, but what we have seen and heard all sounds in line with what I would expect out of a Fable game, with the return of the reputation system, a fantastical world to explore filled with some extraordinary looking environments, and thrilling fights that combine melee, ranged, and spell-flinging combat. Plus, Playground seems to have nailed the whimsical tone of Fable, so I'm confident that they fully understand the assignment. And yes, I know some people have their criticisms of Fable's character design, specifically regarding the protagonist, but I don't think she looks that bad. And frankly, even if she did, I couldn't give a shit what the hero looks like, as long as the game plays well. I fell in love with the Mafia series after picking up Mafia 2 on a whim back in high school. I was completely enraptured with the story and the way the game captured a specific period in time so beautifully. Since then, I've played each Mafia release day one, and I think the series is in great hands with Hangar 13. I had my criticisms of their first entry in the series, Mafia 3. While I loved the story and characters, I didn't like its open world. It felt vapid and lifeless, and was filled with repetitive activities that weren't fun to complete, which left Mafia 3 feeling unnecessarily bloated. However, their follow-up to it, Mafia Definitive Edition, a from-the-ground-up remake of the original Mafia, was excellent. In fact, I think it's the best Mafia game. So when Hangar 13 announced their new Mafia game, Mafia the Old Country, I was immediately all in. Even more so once they confirmed that the Old Country will be a linear, story-focused game, more in line structurally with Mafia 1 and 2, which is exactly what I wanted to hear, as it means it can avoid the pacing pitfalls that weakened Mafia 3. Mafia the Old Country is set to be an origin story for the series that introduces a new protagonist, a miner named Enzo, who gets caught up in Italy's criminal underbelly. As the name implies, the Old Country takes place in Sicily, in the fictional town of San Celeste, which we previously visited in Mafia 2, not America like the other Mafia games, and it's set in the early 1900s, about 2 decades before the original Mafia, revealing the origins of the Mafia and showing their rise to power. You can even play the Old Country in a Sicilian dub with subtitles if you want to give its setting a truly authentic feel. As the Old Country is the first game in the series built in Unreal Engine 5, it's a massive leap forward visually for the series. From the picturesque countryside to the grimy urban areas, Mafia the Old Country is a gorgeous looking game. The Mafia games have always had some of the most engrossing stories and layered world building you'll find in a game, so I can't wait to lose myself to the Old Country in 2025. At number 7, we have the game with the longest gap between announcement and release on this list, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. This poor, long-delayed game. Despite never being a sales juggernaut, Metroid Prime was for a time one of Nintendo's most beloved series among fans, but it felt like we might never see this saga continued. Metroid Prime 3 Echoes was an early Wii game, and aside from the bizarre soccer-inspired 3DS spin-off Metroid Prime Federation Force, which the less is said about the better, the Prime sub-series has been dormant for almost 18 years. Prime 4 has had a tumultuous development cycle. Prime 4 was announced in 2017, the same year the Switch was released, and it was being developed externally by Bandai Namco. However, Nintendo was unhappy with how Prime 4 was coming together under Bandai Namco, and in 2019 they announced that they were scrapping the game and that development would be starting over from scratch at original Metroid Prime developer Retro Studios. Then the project went quiet for 5 years, as Retro's team had their heads down working on Prime 4, until last year when a Nintendo Direct gave us our first look at Metroid Prime 4 in action, and it felt like coming home. Prime 4 immediately had that familiar Metroid Prime vibe, as we saw Samus exploring an alien world, scanning anomalies in the environment, squeezing through corridors in her morph ball form, and blasting through space pirates with her arm cannon. Though with the last Metroid Prime game being almost 20 years and 3 console generations ago, Prime 4 is obviously far more technically advanced than any of its predecessors. Just because it's been a long time coming doesn't mean that Retro Studios are abandoning old story threads. Prime 4 is very much a direct sequel to the prior Metroid Prime games. We know the villain of Prime 4 will be Sylux, a character introduced in the DS's Metroid Prime Hunters, and then teased as the big bad of the next Metroid Prime game at the end of Prime 3. It's great that we got a remaster of the original Metroid Prime on Switch, but seeing as 4 is directly picking up on plot threads of that original trilogy, Nintendo needs to get 2 and 3 on Switch ASAP, so newcomers can get primed for 4. Pun very much intended. Xbox's excellent January Developer Direct held no shortage of significant announcements, but none were more exciting for me than the reveal of Ninja Gaiden 4. I can't believe it finally happened. After 13 years, Ninja Gaiden is finally back in all its gory glory. While I'm excited for Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, this is my Ninja Gaiden. I love the Ninja Gaiden reboot series, and Ninja Gaiden Black and Ninja Gaiden 2 in particular are among my favourite action games of all time. Ninja Gaiden 4 is the first new mainline Ninja Gaiden game since 2012 when we got the ill-received Ninja Gaiden 3 and later its reworked version Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, which while still not up to the standards of Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 was a marked improvement on the original release. Ninja Gaiden 4 is a collaborative effort between Team Ninja and Platinum Games, and it seems to be taking a page out of Devil May Cry 4 and 5's book by featuring a dual protagonist setup. So while Ryu Hayabusa is still playable and plays a prominent role in the story, Ninja Gaiden 4 will also star a new protagonist, Yakumo, a ninja from the new Raven clan, who seems to be at odds with Ryu in the story. Like the prior Ninja Gaiden games, Ninja Gaiden 4 blends traditional Japanese settings and aesthetics with high-tech, futuristic sci-fi cities and machinery, and it features the same style of speedy hack-and-slash action that made the series so beloved, though it's somehow even faster now, so your hand-eye coordination and reflexes had better be on point. While it looks familiar at a glance, and there are plenty of returning combat techniques, our new protagonist Yakumo has plenty of tricks up his sleeve that will help advance the gameplay of Ninja Gaiden 4 beyond what we've experienced, including a grappling hook that will open up even more interesting traversal opportunities, something that Ninja Gaiden was already great about thanks to its wall running, wall jumping, and kunai climbing. Ryu and Yakumo also have different fighting styles. In fact, Yakumo has 2 different fighting styles you can switch between, allowing you to tailor your combos and attack patterns to suit the fight at hand. And he can also utilise blood-binding ninjutsu to turn the blood of his felled enemies into a gigantic blade. The reveal of Ninja Gaiden 4 was wrapped up with a wonderful cherry on top with the announcement and shadow drop of an Unreal Engine 5 remake of Ninja Gaiden 2, aptly titled Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. 3 Ninja Gaiden games in 1 year? We're so fucking back, people. Now we're really in the final leg as we arrive at number 5, Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. There are only a handful of games that I would call masterpieces, but Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is certainly one of them. So a full remake of MGS3 is both an exciting and slightly concerning prospect. With Kojima's unceremonious departure from Konami in 2015, following the release of The Phantom Pain, a lot of players would rather see the Metal Gear franchise left alone, but I think that realistically, that was never going to happen, and frankly, I'd much rather see Konami remake the older MGS games than attempt to continue the franchise with a new entry without Kojima shepherding it. Konami is looked at with a lot of skepticism and ire from gamers, rightfully so. They mistreated one of the industry's greatest visionaries, ran several beloved franchises into the ground, and for years held on to beloved IP like Metal Gear, Castlevania, and Silent Hill, while doing absolutely nothing with them because they were more concerned with the money they were making from pachinko machines and other non-gaming business ventures. But it does feel like they're finally turning a corner. Over the past few years, Konami has brought a ton of their classic series like Castlevania and Contra to modern consoles through excellent collections, and last year's Silent Hill 2 remake was infinitely better than most of us were expecting, so I feel far more positive about MGS Delta now than I would have a few years back, especially as Konami is saying all the right things about Delta. They've confirmed that they're not changing the story in any way, they're even reusing the original voice recordings. This is perfect, as Snake Eater's story is already phenomenal. The relationship between the boss and Naked Snake is one of the most compelling bonds found in any game, and MGS3's lineup of villains is among the best in the series, so they don't need to mess with Snake Eater's story at all. All Konami is doing is giving the game a fresh coat of paint and tightening up the gameplay, which is needed, because while Snake Eater's story has stood the test of time and is still immaculate today, its gameplay is still that of a PS2 game, and certain aspects are undeniably a little dated when you go back to MGS3. Even the simple implementations of crouch walking and third-person aiming that were added in later Metal Gear games are going to make Snake Eater feel infinitely better. However, if you are looking for a more traditional MGS experience, Delta also offers a legacy control scheme, which will make the game control more like the PS2 version of Snake Eater. And if you choose this option, you'll even play the game with fixed camera angles like you would in the original version of Snake Eater, which seems like such an absurd amount of work to implement for a feature that will only be used by a fraction of players. But attention to detail is clearly something Konami is prioritising with this remake, with enemy and animal attacks, as well as environmental hazards, damaging Snake's clothes and leaving cuts and bruises on his body that will slowly transition into permanent scars after the wounds are treated. If you're uninitiated to the MGS franchise, you may be wondering why they would choose to remake 3 before the first game. This is because 3 is a prequel, and I'm guessing that if all goes well, Konami plans to remake the series in chronological order. I should point out that I said at the top of this video I'd only be including games confirmed for 2025, and Konami has not officially labelled any of Delta's product pages for 2025. But Delta's producer said explicitly that getting Delta out in 2025 is a priority for Konami, which I would count as confirmation that it's intended for release this year. Metal Gear Solid is a top 5 all-time gaming franchise for me, and I think Snake Eater is debatably the best game in the series, so I'm of course stoked to replay this game in a new way myself, especially as there's been a severe lack of true stealth games for the past couple of generations. But I'm equally excited that a whole new group of gamers are going to experience one of my favourite games for the first time when Metal Gear Solid Delta releases. At number 4 is Death Stranding 2 on the Beach. I don't know if you could tell by me having this and MGS back to back, but I'm a bit of a Kojima fanboy, and getting a double dose of his games in 2025 is very exciting to me. Death Stranding was very much a Vegemite game. You either loved it or hated it. Some found it pretentious and boring, but I thought Death Stranding's world and characters were fascinating, and I found it to be a relaxing and almost meditative experience to play. Death Stranding 2 once again follows Sam as he leaves behind the United Cities of America to reconnect the greater world to the chiral network. And that's honestly about all we do know for sure about the story, as like with the original Death Stranding, Death Stranding 2's trailers are intentionally very vague. Though one thing we do know is that Kojima started writing the script for DS2 after finishing the first Death Stranding, but chose to scrap what he had and rewrite the game entirely in response to the pandemic after seeing the effect it had on the world. Death Stranding 2 features several returning characters, like Sam Porter Bridges, Fragile, and Higgs, with Norman Reedus, Léa Seydoux, and Troy Baker reprising their roles. But it also features some major newcomers, including a mysterious, unnamed character played by Elle Fanning. Death Stranding had an incredibly memorable cast of characters, so I can't wait to see how Kojima Productions expands the cast in DS2. If you played the first Death Stranding, you no doubt remember that Kojima did body scans of a bunch of celebrities to use their likenesses in the game, including Guillermo del Toro, Edgar Wright, and Conan O'Brien. We already know Death Stranding 2 features the likeness of Mad Max creator George Miller, but I wonder who else Kojima has managed to hide in Death Stranding 2. Kojima's games get pretty out there with their ideas, and Death Stranding was by far the strangest game Kojima has ever made, so it says a lot when I say that Death Stranding 2's trailers indicate that he's ramping things up and getting even weirder with Death Stranding 2. This is Kojima at his most unrestrained and strange, with the trailer for Death Stranding 2 showing us a doll with a man's spirit trapped in it that moves in a choppy stop-motion animation style that's unlike anything else in the game, and our antagonist Higgs fighting some kind of cybernetic samurai while wielding a guitar that shoots electricity. Dumb? Absolutely. But are you gonna tell me this isn't the coolest thing you've ever seen in your life? Well, Death Stranding 2's gameplay seems somewhat in line with the first game, with Sam once again transporting all kinds of packages across treacherous terrain. The world will be even more dangerous this time around as a result of real-time environmental disasters that can reshape environments, like flash floods, forest fires, and earthquakes. Oh, and there's also a bizarre photo mode where you're practically doing modelling shoots with Death Stranding 2's cast members. One exceptional aspect of the first Death Stranding was its emotional use of music. I'll never forget that first low raw song kicking in as I slowly plodded down a mountain and crossed a stream in Death Stranding. So I'm curious what needle drops we'll get in Death Stranding 2. Even outside of the scripted uses of music, Death Stranding had a ton of songs for you to listen to around the world, including an absolute banger from Bring Me the Horizon with Ludens, so I can't wait to see what new music DS2 holds. I've seen those photos of Bring Me hanging out at Kojima Productions. Come on Kojima, get them in there again, please. Let's be real, at this point, you know where you stand on Death Stranding. You're either in or out, and I'm very much in for this sequel on day one. We're really getting into the home stretch now, as we reach number 3, Doom the Dark Ages. I think enough time has passed that I can say that Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal are my favourite shooters of all time, without there being any hint of recency bias in that statement. Everything about those games appeals to my tastes, from the roaring metal soundtracks, the breakneck pace of the game as you blow through stages, blasting demons limb from limb with the best feeling shotgun in gaming, and of course, the cartoonish hyperviolence of Doom's glory kills. So naturally, when Doom the Dark Ages, a new prequel to the series, was announced, it shot right up my most anticipated games list. The Dark Ages looks like exactly what I need out of a new Doom game. More of the same core gameplay, but with just enough new ideas to keep things fresh. For starters, we've got a different vibe to the setting here. As the title suggests, Doom the Dark Ages is going for a more medieval fantasy vibe than the prior two Doom games, with the trailer showcasing awe-inspiring gothic environments and a shot of the Doomslayer riding a dragon. The gameplay of Doom the Dark Ages is also returning to the more boots-on-the-ground feel of Doom 2016, with less of the verticality that was found in Eternal. Doomslayer isn't jumping all over the place and grappling around in the Dark Ages like he was in Eternal, as id want to make him feel more like a walking tank here. So the Dark Ages pace is going to be a little bit slower than Eternal, though certainly still faster than 90% of other shooters. Discovering the Doomslayer's loadout of weaponry is always one of the most delightful parts of the Doom games, and his gear loadout seems crazier than ever here, with the trailer showcasing him wielding a shield with a saw blade on the edge that can be used to block and parry attacks, or thrown to shred enemies to pieces, as well as a gun that grinds enemies' skulls, then uses the bone fragments as ammunition, which is the most Doom weapon of all time. The Doomslayer's look has also been tweaked to fit the medieval setting, and his new outfit, which combines his traditional armour with a fur cape, has him looking more badass than ever before. My only real concern with Doom the Dark Ages is how its soundtrack will turn out. Doom and Doom Eternal's scores were composed by legendary metal composer Mick Gordon, who also composed music for the Wolfenstein games and has helped produce songs for some of the biggest bands in the metal scene, including Bring Me the Horizon, Architects, and Motionless in White. Needless to say, Mick is an extremely talented musician, but following the release of Doom Eternal, Mick Gordon and id Software had a massive falling out, so he isn't going to be involved in the soundtracks for their games going forward. Mick Gordon's soundtracks are a huge part of the identity of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, and I worry that without him, the Dark Ages could feel like it's missing something. With that said, the music we've heard in the trailers for the Dark Ages sounds good, so there is reason to remain optimistic. But finishing move, the sound studio taking over from Mick Gordon have some massive shoes to fill. At number 2, my penultimate pick is Ghost of Yotei. Ghost of Tsushima was one of the best, if not the best, new IP Sony debuted during the PS4 era. Sucker Punch has always been one of my favourite teams in Sony's orbit. I loved the Sly Cooper trilogy, I loved the Infamous games, and unsurprisingly, I loved Ghost of Tsushima, so I've been eagerly awaiting the announcement of a sequel. But when Ghost of Yotei was announced, I was caught off guard by the very nature of the game. Like others, I assumed the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima would once again follow Jin Sakai as he heads to another part of Japan. Hey, I guess the new area of Japan part was right. But with everything else, Sucker Punch defied expectations, giving us a follow-up that features not just a new protagonist, but a new time period. Set in Hokkaido in 1603, Ghost of Yotei takes place over 300 years after Ghost of Tsushima, and stars a new warrior taking up the ghost mantle named Atsu. It's a bold move to ditch Jin and not go for the safe bet of a direct sequel, but I respect it, and it has exciting implications for the future of this franchise, as it indicates that the series is an anthology, where each new Ghost of game will follow a different protagonist during a unique time in Japan's history. Though we know little about Ghost of Yotei's narrative beyond the fact that it's a revenge story, Sucker Punch has said that Ghost of Yotei will be a bit more open-ended than Ghost of Tsushima, offering you more choices throughout the story to shape the narrative and mould Atsu into your distinct version of the character. While its story was good, it was the slick gameplay that made Ghost of Tsushima such a compelling experience. I loved the way Tsushima approached open world design. Ghost of Tsushima took the Ubisoft style of checkbox-filled open world game and refined it with clever innovations that made it the definitive version of this style of open world game. The way Tsushima uses the wind to diegetically guide you towards your objective, instead of cluttering the screen with ugly UI elements, was a genuine game changer that gave Tsushima this incredible cinematic vibe that made Tsushima feel like an interactive Kurosawa movie. So I'm looking forward to seeing what new innovations Sucker Punch bring to open world game design in Ghost of Yotei. Another huge strength of Ghost of Tsushima was its frenetic, blood-drenched combat, and we know Atsu will have a wider array of weaponry to utilise than Jin, as alongside katanas, Atsu can wield kusarigama, dual swords, and even rifles, seeing as firearms are 300 years more advanced in Yotei than they were in Tsushima, which is sure to add more variety to Tsushima's already stellar combat mechanics. And finally, at number 1, surprising nobody, is Grand Theft Auto 6. Is it a predictable pick? Absolutely. But how could my number 1 be anything else? We're getting the first new GTA game in over a decade in 2025. Rockstar is the premier game studio, and the world stops when they drop a new game. No other studio is given the time, resources and budget that Rockstar is given, and because of that, their games are of an almost unparalleled degree of quality. Games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and GTA 5 were narrative, gameplay and technical showpieces that showcase what's possible in this medium. Realistically, with how big Rockstar is, and how long this game has been in development, GTA 6 is likely the most expensive game ever made. Picking up Grand Theft Auto 5, or I should say, having my mum go up to the counter to collect my pre-order because I was 16 and couldn't buy an R-rated game myself yet, was one of the most memorable gaming experiences I've ever had. The excitement around the game was palpable. Everyone was losing their minds with excitement, and GTA 5 dominated the conversation in the gaming space online and among my friend circle for months after it launched. I have no doubt that history will repeat itself when Grand Theft Auto 6 is released. Grand Theft Auto 6 is taking us back to Leonida, the GTA universe's equivalent of Florida that houses Vice City, which we'll be revisiting for the first time since Vice City Stories came out in 2006. Rockstar is playing things close to their chest with GTA 6, so we still don't know much about the story, only the bits and pieces we can put together through the trailer. But it seems like, similarly to GTA 5, we'll have multiple playable characters in GTA 6, though this time it's seemingly a duo of protagonists instead of a trio, with GTA 6 starring a character named Lucia, who appears to have recently been released from prison, and her as of now unnamed male partner, though some leaks suggest his name is Jason. But take that with a grain of salt, because we have nothing officially confirming that yet. It's clear that GTA 6 is going for a Bonnie and Clyde vibe with its partners in crime, and I'm sure their relationship is going to be an integral part of the story and getting us invested in it. Fair play to Rockstar, they know how to craft a captivating trailer, don't they? We've seen so little, but they already have me intrigued by these characters. I've seen 90 seconds of this game, and I'm already curious about the dynamic between these characters, and wondering what pulls Lucia back into a life of crime right after getting out of prison. One of the most important and beloved aspects of GTA is its humour, which satirises and skewers all aspects of American culture. And in the 12 years between GTA releases, so much has happened. There's the rise of influencers, the endless insufferable culture wars, a global pandemic, and now 2 Trump presidencies. What I'm saying is, Rockstar has a lot of material to work with, and I'm interested to see what they hone in on in GTA 6. Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be a massive moment for the games industry. It's without question going to be the single biggest game of this generation, and one of the highest selling games of all time. This is the rare game that is guaranteed to sell tens of million copies on name alone, and GTA 6 is also going to shift millions of consoles, as it's going to force casual players who only care about GTA, COD and sports games to upgrade off of their PS4s and Xbox Ones. GTA 6 is going to be the kind of moment for this industry that you only experience a handful of times in your life. I mean, look at the cultural impact GTA 6 is already having. The one trailer we have for this game has broken records for YouTube viewership, and you can't go to the comments section for any unrelated news article, social media post, or YouTube video without seeing the inevitable "I can't believe we got blank before GTA 6" reply. We still have so much to learn about GTA 6. What does the moment-to-moment gameplay look like? What new innovative mechanics and systems does GTA 6 include to evolve the formula? And what does the online component of GTA 6 look like? We know GTA Online practically prints money for Rockstar, so I'm sure it's a huge focus for them with GTA 6. Only time will give us these answers. Of course, there is always the possibility of Grand Theft Auto 6 slipping out of 2025, due to how wildly ambitious GTA 6 no doubt is. Rockstar knows how important it is that GTA 6 is in tip-top shape for launch, and hey, they've earned the right to take all the time they need. But for now, GTA 6 is scheduled for 2025, so let's all keep our fingers crossed that it hits its planned release window. And with that, we've arrived at the end of the video. As I said at the top, 2025 is looking like it's going to be an extraordinary year for games, and it's always fun to take a moment to look ahead and bask in the hype of what's to come. Now that you know what I'm most excited for in 2025, let me know in the comments what games you have your eyes on in 2025, and if there's anything you're dying to get your hands on that didn't make my list. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. And stay tuned for my next video, where I'll be counting down my top 25 games of 2024. Until next time, be well guys.